this is your instructor, Amy Lyons, and I am here today to talk about lecture number 1 for Module 2. And this lecture is going to be about the language families of North America. So here I have a list of some of the language families that are found in North America. This is not an extensive list, but these are some of the more common language families. And so I've highlighted in green the ones that we will be specifically talking about in different modules in this book, or in this course, sorry. So these language families include the Eskimo, Aleut languages, which are found along the very northern parts of Alaska, Canada, and even into Greenland. The Athabascan languages, which are found in a large swath across northern United States and Canada, and then in the southwestern part of the United States. The Algic language family, which is often referred to as the Algonquin language family, which is found on the east coast of the United States and Canada. The Caddoan languages, which are found on the Great Plains of the United States. The Iroquoian languages that are found in the Great Lakes region, all the way down parts of the east coast of the United States, and then further in the southeastern part of the United States with Cherokee. The Kiowa-Tanoan languages, which are from the southwestern part of the United States. The Muskogean languages, which are the southeastern part of the United States. The Siouan languages, which are also found on the Great Plains of the United States. The Uto-Aztecan languages, which are on the western part of the United States, also found in Mexico. Salish, or the Salesian languages, which are found on the Pacific Northwest of the United States and Canada. And then I have on here California languages. California is not a specific language family, but there are so many language families and individual languages found in California that I think it's important to talk about the linguistic diversity that's found there. Then I have listed isolates. These are languages that don't belong to a specific language family. And then I have listed pidgins, creoles, and mixed languages. And these are different types of languages that don't really fit into a language family or a isolate category. We'll have separate presentations about isolates, pidgins, creoles, and mixed languages, different PowerPoint lectures that we'll talk about those. So this is what's called the Ives-Goddard map of North American language families and isolates. And what this is, Ives-Goddard was a anthropologist linguist who worked for the Smithsonian, who put together data about where different languages were recorded and put it together in a physical map so people could look at and see the distribution of language families across the United States. So these are not individual languages, but language families. And if you look on the left side of the map here, so here's the names of a lot of the language families and then the colors that they're represented. So we talked about the Eskimo languages being along Alaska, Canada, and up here around Greenland. On the right side, you see a list of just names. These are language isolates. These are languages that do not fit into the other language families. And like I said, we'll have a separate presentation just talking about language isolates and what that means. But this is a good way to kind of visualize where different groups of languages were found pre-contact. I have a link here to Ives-Goddard's map, and then I have a second link to the map of Oklahoma languages. And so I would like to show you. So here is the link if you follow to Ives-Goddard map, and you can download this if you wanted to download it. The map of Oklahoma languages, this is something that I worked on when I was a grad student at OU. And so these are the different tribal territories in Oklahoma. And down below, there's the list of different languages that are spoken in Oklahoma. And if you notice, they're organized by their language families: the Algic, the Athabascan, the Caddoan, Iroquoian. There's isolate languages. Remember those ones that don't fit into families. And then if you click on the individual names of the languages, like here I'm clicking on Pawnee, it'll bring us to a very brief description of Pawnee. So at the time of contact, Pawnee was spoken around the Platte River in present-day Nebraska. And then it has some citations of where someone could find information about the Pawnee language. And then information that is in the archive at the Sam Noble Museum in Norman on the OU campus, and then some links. Some of these links have gone dead since I worked on this in, gosh, it was like 2012 that I worked on this. So not all of these links work anymore. But these citations are all good, and the materials in the archive, these are all still correct. And so you can get a little bit of information about the language, related languages, where it was spoken, for different languages that are spoken here in Oklahoma. So going back to our presentation. So what is a language family? This module is all about the language families in North America. So a language family is a group of languages that are related through common descent. So when I talk about common descent, this means that at some time in the past, related languages all came from a common mother language. And so we call this common mother language a proto-language. Okay, so it's what came before the proto-language. And the mother language evolved, changed over time and distance, and became daughter languages. And related languages, we would call them sister languages. So what's an example of this? So we know that the Latin language, the language of the Roman people, which is no longer spoken, changed over time and over distance, the territory of the Roman Empire, and evolved into what we know today as Portuguese and French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian. So these are all the daughter languages of the mother language Latin. And French, Italian, Spanish, they are sister languages to each other. And how these languages changed from Latin was the thousands of years since those areas of the world spoke Latin. The language changed over and over and over in small little ways. The distance between the people that now speak Italian versus the people that now speak Spanish allowed changes in the language. And so what might have been just small little dialect changes over a very long period of time changed the languages enough to where they became their own separate languages. So according to the language website Ethnologue, there are 7,117 living human languages distributed in 142 different language families. And this is across the world. This is not just North America. There are about 30 language families in North America, and about 15 isolates, those languages that don't fit into language families. And then we also have creoles and pidgins. So out of the 142 different language families in the world, about 30 of them are found in North America. And this is not including South America, just United States, Canada, and the northern part of Mexico. So I have here a link to a list about different language families in North America. And so if you follow that, you'll go to this website right here where it lists all the different language families right here. And it talks about the different Creole languages as well. I'm not sure if it includes, it doesn't look like it includes isolates, which again I said we'll have a separate presentation just about that. So you can kind of look here at these language families of North America to learn a little bit more about them. So, how do linguists determine if languages are related, if they are part of the same language family, if they have a common descent? Well, there are different ways to tell, and we're looking at different kinds of relationships. So, the first relationship here is a genetic relationship, that this language evolved from this other language, and that relates to people as well, that these people that speak this language, their ancestors were a people who spoke this other language, this mother language. And then you have what's called a typological relationship. And a typological relationship is a commonalities in a language that is not necessarily a genetic relationship, that these people are related to other people, but more that they share common features in their language. For example, every language on earth has verbs. So you cannot say that this language A and language B are related to each other just because they both use verbs, because every language uses verb. But there are some typological, some classificatory things in languages that can help determine if languages are related if we can't build that genetic relationship and show that over time that these people were related to each other. So this is the difference between related languages and common structures in languages. So one way that linguists in the past have worked to show if languages are related is they've done what's called a word comparison. The word comparisons were designed by a linguist named Swadesh, and there is a list of words. It was created in the 1950s. There's anywhere from 100 to 200 common words known as the core vocabulary. And what linguists would do is you would find the translation of these, 200 words in language A and the translation of these 200 words in language B, and you would compare and see how many of these are exactly the same, very similar, or roughly the same, and how many are completely different. And by that, try to judge how related these languages are. And so what you're looking for is cognates. Cognates are words that have the same meaning in more than one language. And so we see in English, we have a lot of cognates for words from French, and we have a lot of cognates in words from German and others. In part because we are related to these other languages, but we're also because there has been contact with people from these other languages. The French invaded England, and so we got a lot of French sounding words in our language, not necessarily because we were closely related to those people, but because we borrowed those words. So a word comparison, which I have the link here to Swadesh's list. These are the 200 words of the core vocabulary, and they're numbered here. And you can see that there's nouns like day, there's verbs like to die, to dig, there's adjectives like dirty. There's not a lot of function words, not things like prepositions in, on, of. There's not a lot of words like determiners like the or an. We have a pronoun here in I, and so that's interesting to see. Let's see if she or he is on here as well. I don't see she, and I didn't notice he, but they have, here's he right there. So you have some pronouns, a lot of nouns, some body parts. Here's a question word, how. That's interesting. And so we have all these words, and so you would list these 200 words in two languages and just compare and see how how many words are similar and not similar between the languages. But again, that's not a foolproof way of showing if two languages are genetically related. So another way that you could determine common descent is doing a grammar comparison. Words are easy to change in languages. Even in the same language, like in England versus Australia versus the United States, there's some things that we have different words for, like the trunk of a car or an elevator or different types of food. But grammar is hard to change. So things like the order that the words go in a sentence, things like how you where you put adjectives. Do they go before the noun? Do they go after the noun? So comparing grammar can show commonalities that you might not see in just a list of individual words. Another way that you can determine common descent is looking at sound changes. So in historical linguistics, the study of linguistics over a very long period of time, there's something called the comparative method. And this is a way that you can track sound changes, not word changes, not grammar changes, but actual phonetic sound changes in a systematic way. And this allows for us to reconstruct proto-languages. So if we know that French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese are all the daughter languages of Latin, we can look at the sounds that are found in each of those languages, and the ones that are the same in all of them were very, very likely the sounds that were found in Latin. And if there are unique sounds, let's say Portuguese has a sound that isn't found in French or Spanish or Italian, then we can guess that this either was introduced by another contact with another group, with another language family, or it was something spontaneous that just changed over time. And so by using this comparative method, we can try to rebuild proto-languages and look at sound change in a systematic way to show that, oh, well, this language very well could be related to these other languages because of the sounds that are in it and the changes that have happened. So when it comes to studying language families in North America, there's several people who have studied them. John Powell in 1891 theorized that there were 58 language families in North America. He used vocabulary as one of the main things to show these similarities. We still use the nomenclature or the naming system that Powell invented, of adding the AN on the end of the languages. So you have like Muskogean, Caddoan, Siouan for the different languages. For the most part, these language families still stand, but there's been some changes. Edward Sapir, who's a famous linguist and anthropologist, came along and he was able to combine some of Powell's language families to show this deeper genetic relationship. And so it narrowed down that 50 down to the 30 that we talk about today. Joseph Greenberg, he tried to form a supergroup. So he built on the work that Edward Sapir did and said, well, if we were able to get down from 58 to 30, maybe these 30 language families are all related to each other too. There are a lot of flaws with this, and it just doesn't work. There are not all of the languages of North America are not related into one language family. There's just different sets of languages. Now, why would that be? If you believe in the theory of people coming over the land bridge in Alaska, some of that could be different waves of people. If you believe that people came in more than one way to North America, then that would show different groups of people coming different times. We also know that people have throughout history moved along South and North America. Maybe some of the languages in North America are distant relatives of languages from South America and vice versa. Edward Vahada is a current linguist who has proposed kinship between the Na-Dene, the Athabascan languages, and a language family in Siberia called Yeniseian. And he has shown that these languages very well could be very distantly related. So if you do believe that some people came from Europe and Asia across a land bridge, this might be some evidence of that, that at least one group of people may have done this. And this is still a theory, this hasn't been proven. So here are some more language families that we're not going to cover specifically in our class. I mentioned some of these. Some of these I didn't mention at the very beginning of this presentation. The green text is a link to a Wikipedia page about this language family. I strongly recommend that as a class you go through and check out some of these language families and see the greater diversity of linguistics in North and Central America. So this is all I have for lecture 1 in module 2, language families. In our next lecture, we will talk about language isolates. Thank you guys.